on LinkedIn with my buddy Ondish. Ondish, we've talked about pivoting and being flexible and getting kind of out of your comfort zone before. You have a great career of experiencing that over and over and over again. And
Hmm.
something that we should drill in here about is when the 8,000 pound gorilla in the room, as you said on the last post,
Yeah.
came and gobbled up Lucasfilm. And so Disney comes in 2012-ish, I think,
Yep.
and they purchase or make an acquisition of Lucasfilm and all the Lucasfilm properties. And I remember we had a conversation about this before I had transitioned to the private sector. I was still in government, and I really wanted to know what are you going to do? You're going to go with this big shiny object, Disney, which is a great company and is a great security organization, or are you going to stay with George and Lucasfilm?
Yeah.
And take us through that decision process because that's fascinating.
Yeah. It was a tough time from a decision standpoint. It was a wonderful time from a company standpoint. I think there was a lot of positive things that came out of that acquisition for both brands. But essentially, what it did was Disney purchased all the intellectual properties, so all the movie rights, all the naming, everything that had to do with the movies on the intellectual property side was purchased. But all of the physical properties were not purchased. George maintained control of the physical property. So things like the Presidio, things like Skywalker Ranch, they all still belong to us as an organization on the George side of the house. So we still have Disney as tenants now in those various locations. And the decision for me really came down to there was an expectation that I would leave to go to Disney, which is, like you said, is a wonderful organization. I mean, super supportive, and were really, really reaching out immediately to me to talk about what that could look like. And then, of course, I had the other side of the house here that was remaining with George, which was the physical properties and his security needs that, may have not been a full-time job, so to speak. And what was I going to do? So my boss, who is still my boss at the time, made an offer that if I wanted to stay on the Skywalker Properties side of the house, that I could pick up the property management as well as the security, and property management in this sense meaning maintaining and managing and negotiating all the leases with tenants, doing all the tenant relations, making sure that the property management program, which is staffed separately than security, continued to thrive. So it happened to be a vacancy at the time that this whole transition happened. They were looking for somebody to take on this role, and I stepped up, raised my hand, and said, "I'll do that." Sure. I had to learn it, but
I was going to ask how you learned it.
yeah, it is one of those things that when you and I were talking, that this was the pivot, right? This was the moment when an opportunity presented itself that I had no background in, other than my parents owned a seven room apartment building that I helped them manage, and now I was going to go on to this multi-million-dollar property of managing leases and all that. But you know what that came down to? It came down to relationships, and it came down to your ability to build relationships with people. Not necessarily all within your network, but a new brand, a new structure, a new career path. I mean, all that stuff. And if you've got that innate ability to make those connections and build those relationships, that's what I thought when I got into it. Was like, I can do that. I can learn, just like we can learn anything from textbook, right? But you can't learn personality. You can't learn the ability to build a rapport with a person. So, all credit to my boss for giving me the opportunity. And, I did some intense coursework to really understand what I was getting into on the property management side and real estate asset management in general. But it was really the personality and being able to talk to my predecessor in property management, who was there, getting guidance from her and really understanding, how she built the relationships and then maintaining them and taking them forward. It was a serious left turn in my career, in the sense that I now have this other piece that I manage. I have kept security, obviously, but now with both of them, they're very. Here's the good thing, and you'll understand this from a corporate perspective. I am a cost center, and I'm also a revenue center now.
That's
So
right. This is like
all
the
good.
ideal thing. Yeah, that's what everybody's shooting for.
Exactly.
Perfect storm. So
Exactly.
we talk about identifying those opportunities and it really kind of embracing the change and embracing these opportunities. Did you know that this was going to work out as well as it has over the years, or was it just kind of like, I just need to jump into this and learn it?
Yeah, I think that's it. I think it was, this is the path I want to pursue. So I'm going to just grab it and go. And maybe I won't do it so well. Maybe I will. I don't know, until I get into it and I actually work at it. But as you and I had said, off camera here, that if you're already going with a mindset that you can't do it, you can't.
Yeah.
There is no possibility you can do it. So when an opportunity presents itself, jump at it, grab it, and take it to where you can take it. You'll never know what's going to happen. And I didn't know I'd wind up in the position I'm in. In fact, I try to explain my position to colleagues. They don't get it. They don't understand how these things go together or how how they've evolved that way. And so again, I'm blessed. I've always said I love my job and I would
Yeah.
not trade it for anything. I do what I do because I love what I do.
Well, this is the ultimate pivot when you're getting into an area and still being responsible, by the way, for fire life safety and security
Sure.
and all those things. And now you're now responsible for kind of making these big contracts and managing gigantic multi-million dollar properties that are not, it's not like you manage a building. Like you said, your folks manage an apartment building. It's probably a lot easier than managing the different properties in different states and different locations
Yeah.
all around. Relationships are so important. Did you look for mentorship opportunities as well in that, even outside of Skywalker?
I did, and like I said, the previous property manager there and I are still friends, and I'm able to talk with her whenever I need to, and she's really laid a lot of great groundwork for me in terms of how on the real estate side of things, how people are, how you build those relationships and how you nurture them. And outside of that, there's organizations on the real estate side like BOMA, in San
Oh, right.
Francisco, where
Yeah.
there's a lot of resources available for property managers and property management teams. And then I'm blessed to have a wonderful property management team working with me there in an assistant property manager and a tenant coordinator that really carry our culture forward. And I think that, the one thing I hear from our tenants all the time is that not only is security what they consider to be top notch in terms of how they feel when they work there, but how they're treated by the property management team is equal to that. And I think that's something again that comes from the top, right? We treat people like we want to be treated and better than we want to be treated because they're who we're here to serve. We are servants. We're not the bosses of these people, right? We're here to serve them. We're here to enable them to do their best work. And that is from the security side and the property management side. It's just our philosophy.
That's great. Last thing, how has COVID impacted your job on the daily? I'm sure there's got to be some lessons learned that you can impart on us.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. So we have these facilities that are public facing now. We also have our private facilities. With the variety of our operations, there's some people who just couldn't work from home. The rancher cannot work from home. He cannot, ranch the cattle from his house. So we've had people on site at our rural locations as well as in our office buildings in the form of essential workers for our tenants throughout the whole pandemic. And it's fluctuated. As you know, our campus down in San Francisco holds about 3,000 employees of various tenants normally. We're down to 50, maybe
Hmm.
75. So the
Yeah.
place feels like a ghost town, but there's still people there. And we've been operating it 100% as usual, just because we don't want to shut the buildings down to have to relaunch them again. And there
Yep.
are people there. So our decision early on was to make it available to those essential workers that need it. Same with our ranches. We have essential functions up there that need to be continued throughout the pandemic, and we've done everything we can to make that not just um, available but comfortable for people. In terms of the policies we put in place, the screening we do at the front gate before you ever get in. We've certified the fire department as a mobile lab now, so they can do the rapid
Wow.
COVID testing with the
Great.
15-minute response. We use them at our various facilities to make sure that everything is good and they can respond immediately to exposure incidents. So, we've changed a lot of how we operate, but we still have people that we need to take care of at all of our facilities.
That's great. And I'm going to go with one more thing. When you look at somebody who's transitioning, you told us earlier or in the last segment about a Marine who was coming on board or you were interviewing. What do
Yep.
you what do you what do you recommend when you're talking with somebody? We pass the resume stage. Now you're into the maybe in person or maybe even Zoom now interview.
Yeah,
What kind of
sure.
things are you looking for that somebody who may have a law enforcement background is going to be saying to you? Do you want them
Mhm.
to understand your culture automatically, or is it what kind of things
I,
do you look for?
I almost always start off the interviews with what questions do you have for me? Before I start launching into questions that I have, I want them to ask me the questions, and that tells me so much about
Yeah.
where a person's head is at, right? And I'm going to answer whatever the question is. I'm not. It's not a trick question. I will give them the answers, but I'm interested to hear what their thought process is. And normally, if they start off in some tactical way, I will respond to it, and I try to lead them down a strategic path. And you and I have talked about the difference between tactical and strategic. I want to see and get some feeling from them where they are on both sides of that. Because some people you need to have very tactical,
You.
some people you need to have very strategic. Some people, most of us have a blend of both, right? And I think that depending on the position, depending on what you're trying to fill, you want to get a sense of that from my interviewer side of things. I want to get a sense of that as quickly as possible. And then I'll try to steer them into a comfortable path for a conversation as opposed to bullet point talking, right?
Uh,
I mean, everybody comes
or
in with their,
scenario based
yeah,
or
exactly.
something.
Exactly. I mean, you bring a friend in or a colleague in to help with these interviews. And the one thing I talk to them about all the time, in fact, Mark and I interviewed the Marine who came in the other day. And the one thing that we talked about was, he was stiff, but he wasn't stiff because he was a bad guy. He was stiff because he was still holding that very military bearing, which is super important from a tactical perspective. But he's coming into a leadership role where he needs to be more strategic and understanding that you got to rough or smooth off those rough edges on the tactical side to get to the other side. That's how we steer the conversation. So what I would prefer is when somebody comes in to talk to me about a position is that they come in with questions about the culture, about the structure, about the expectations, about, ask me what the last major incident that this position had to spearhead was and how it was handled and whether I thought that was the right way or not. I mean,
That's great.
it's a two-way conversation. And I think that in law enforcement, when I came out, the authority asked the questions, I gave the answers, right?
That's right.
In the corporate world, it's two-way. You need to make sure that this position is a fit for you as much as I need to make sure you're a fit for the position. And, I mean, that is the way that corporate culture works, and that is a different mindset.
No, it totally is. And I would hope that most leaders in the corporate side do truly want to hear feedback. Like, what are
Yep.
we doing good? What are we doing bad? Tell me
Yep.
what what kind of challenges are you seeing? And I think as people are applicants, and hopefully we're doing in-person interviews here in the very near future, but there are things that you can experience about their culture just walking up to the building.
Sure.
And so have those questions ready to be asking and ask an intelligent question and to your point, not super tactical and think about there's always a bigger goal here. You
Hmm.
walk up to your property at the Presidio and you're having an experience just immediately from the parking lot or even else before you get to the parking lot in, right? And
Hmm.
what does that entail? And I think which is a great place to kind of pause here and impart on our listeners that this is a good example of what you should be doing to learn about the culture, networking with your partners to ask them about what their experiences have been, but also thinking intelligently about what am I going to say
Hmm.
in these interviews? What kind of questions are what's important to me? Do I want to have a dialogue or do I just want to shoot from the hip and answer these questions like I
Yep.
would with a law enforcement brain?
Yep.
And because it is a mind shift. And I think the only way you do this, by the way, is through repetition and practice.
Agreed.
And
Yep.
you've been through a number of interviews, I'm sure, even for your most recent position, and they're a little different probably every time, but you're learning something about the culture of the organization just even in the interview.
Yeah.
And that's going to make you successful or hopefully steer you to something that you want to be a part of or away from something you don't want to be a part of or that
Agreed.
won't benefit you in the long run. So
Yep.
any parting words, any last bits of advice before I let you go?
I would just reiterate a little bit of what we've said, and that is be open to opportunities as they come because you don't know where they're going to lead, and don't shut them down just out of matter of course. Be
Right.
open to it, think about it,
Right.
and it may lead you in a wonderful new direction that you had no idea you were going.
No, this little place called ILM.
Yeah, right.
Led to
Exactly.
Skywalker Ranch. Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you, Andis. We really appreciate your time today. To the folks who are watching along with us, share this with your partners. Like and comment. Keep following us. If you have questions, feel free to DM us. Both Andis and I do this a lot where we talk to people who are in transition. So consider us a resource. And Andis, thank you very much again. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it.